Hang on a moment, friends. Yes, we are now talking. Welcome to WeatherBrains episode number 856. And watching the Chicago tornado warning. And I actually hit the trigger here and I wasn't quite ready. Yes, we are now talking. Welcome to WeatherBrains episode number 856. So what I'm doing, it's getting my earpiece in and getting audio hijack turned on here. And if you're looking for the actual produced program, it will be about 7 minutes in. And so, yes, now I can flip over to the regular audio arrangement here. Sorry about that. I actually just hit the button too soon. You know, sometimes that happens. You hit the button too soon here. So let's go over to now you can hear me. Sorry. Talk about discombobulated here. This is a typical Monday, isn't it? Yes. So I got to get Jen's stuff in here and Tony's audio locked in here. Yeah, there's a tornado warning for Chicago. In fact, what I can do is just we can kind of watch that together while I'm doing my stuff here. So it's always interesting when you've got a major city and a potential tornado. And that thing came pretty much right over O'Hare. It produced a wind gust in excess of 80 miles an hour there. And that's pretty excessive. And again, I'm watching the radar and some live feeds, the local television broadcasters out of Chicago. And of course, they're on the air with this, as they should be. But anyway, this is WeatherBrains. This is the pre-show. This is the episode for Monday, June the 13th. And I should mention that we're going to have two shows this week. We've got a show tonight, which is our regularly scheduled show for this week. And next week's show, we're going to record this Thursday night at 8 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Central. So it's going to be a twofer this week. We'll have a show tonight. We'll have a show Thursday night. And I'm actually going to try and take a week off next week. I've not had a vacation series of days in a year. And everybody needs one of those for mental health reasons here, if you know what I mean. So, all right, let me quickly get the embed code so the TV folks can get us on the air. For those that don't know, we're on local television here. And I got to make one little change for that. And then I think we're going to be okay. And I think you're still seeing the screen share of the potential tornado at Chicago. And that's a pretty nasty looking storm there. That's pretty intense. It's been cyclic. It's been coming and going is typically the case with these things. But anyway, we must carry on here. So let me stop the share for just a moment so I can get everybody invited. Then we'll put that back on here. And again, if you're new to this, this is the pre-show. This is the time of the program where we share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and from time to time we see outrageous things. And I do know that we got a few folks that are out tonight. Troy is traveling. He should be in the air. I believe Troy is flying to Mississippi. And I know that Jen is out and that she's got some weather issues to deal with. And let me see. I think that's everybody. So let's get everybody invited and we'll get our guest on here. Okay. Go back and take a look at our Chicago storm. And I would take some of the stuff live, but I can't do that. I don't like taking anything I don't have permission to share. I got some great video I've seen from this thing from different sources in Chicago. And again, just if you follow my Twitter feed, you can see like that video from Wrigley was pretty eerie, you know, with the tornado sirens going and the tarp was down, everything like that. But certainly an interesting evening for our friends there. All right, let me stop the share here for a moment and we'll start bringing everybody on here. Yeah, I was totally discombobulated. That's odd. Usually I'm all set, ready to go, and I got everything all set up here. It's a little confusing the way we have to do the audio routing so people on the show can hear the audio elements and down the line. And I use a program called Audio Hijack Pro, which is a virtual audio routing system for a computer. And it takes the various sources like the soundboard that I use and everything else, and we kind of route that through. And of course, we have to record the show, and that this is a core audio podcast. Most people listen. But anyway, we'll put the Chicago tornado warning storm back on here. We could just talk about this for the show here. What do you guys think? Oh, this is nasty. O'Hare just had a wind gust of over 80 with this. And they are obviously shut down.
Yeah, we can definitely talk about that. Tornado going into Chicago.
Yikes. Did that happen today?
Right now.
Oh, my.
The winds are screaming through there. Let's see.
Lord. Let's get out the old GR2 here.
Somebody likes the Virtual Weather Ready Fest 2020.
Oh, good for them. Good luck with that one.
A liaison.
Yeah, the wind fields are awfully impressive with this.
Yeah, it's impressive. Look, it's like an upside down Pac-Man.
Yeah, it's been cyclic.
It's a big hail too. 2.5 inch hail.
But that thing came right over the big airport.
Yeah.
Rick Smith, does your eyeballs pop out when you look at this?
Are there any television stations that you can watch?
Focus for a second to see where we were, but yeah, Chicago. Yeah, that's a beast of a storm.
Just had a wind gust of over 80 at O'Hare.
Saw that. Yeah.
And it's pretty nasty. But this is the big population center at 7 o'clock in the evening, their local time. And I'm not the kind of guy that gets on NWS chat in an area where I don't cover to not bog things down, but maybe one of our NOAA associates here can do that and come in the back door and see what's going on up there. All right, we got to get the show going here. Welcome to our television viewers. We have been doing some Chicago WeatherBrains here. And again, for those that are watching on the YouTube, some people watch this thing, 10 years after it happens. We're doing this on June 13th, 2022, as we got a severe tornado warning storm coming through Chicago. But Larry, can you hear us okay? You good? All right, give me a mic check real quick. Be sure we can hear you.
Absolutely. How's it going?
Oh, yeah, loud and clear. Good. Excellent. All right, let's get the recorders going here. I sure feel like I haven't done something, but whatever I haven't done, we'll figure out what it is when it doesn't happen. All right, so the audio recorders are going, and here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
You're listening to WeatherBrains. They're kind of a big deal.
Kind of a big deal. WeatherBrains episode number 856. This is the weekly show all about weather. 16 years strong and still hanging in there like a hair in a biscuit. This is for the 13th of June, 2022, and interesting weather happening as we do the show. And Jen is out tonight. She's actually handling severe weather, but we've got some pretty rough weather coming through Chicago, a tornado-warned storm that has come right through the big airport, O'Hare, and it's dropping south, I guess, down toward Midway. Who's a good Chicago guy on the show here? I fly through there fairly often at both airports, but I'm probably not the best Chicago guy on the show here. But anyway, it's pretty rough. They've been under tornado warning for about the last 40 minutes. And again, we're doing this at 7:03 Central Time, Chicago time on Monday the 13th. And there's been some pretty high winds coming through there. But again, we'll talk about that in moments. But let's see, I see Dr. Neil Jacobs. Dr. Jacobs, are you in Washington, North Carolina, Florida, Nebraska, Walla Walla?
I am. I'm in North Carolina. I was in DC all last week with it was Capitol Hill Oceans Week, the AMS Policy Colloquium, and a big UCAR meeting, all packed into 5 days.
Yeah, we got to get a debrief on all that. I know you've been a busy guy. I see Rick Smith is joining us from Norman. And Rick, you got a busy week coming up, don't you?
Yeah, not weather-wise, really. It's summertime here, and that looks to continue. And it's not my favorite season, but it's better than hail and tornadoes, right, Kim? But yeah, I'm going to be tomorrow morning flying out to my first visit ever to the state of Wisconsin, going to Milwaukee for the AMS Warning Communications Conference and also the Broadcast Conference. So pretty excited about that. It'll be the first big conference I've been to, and I don't know, since forever, it feels like.
That's awesome. The timing on those, I have been to some of the AMS broadcast conferences, but the timing is never good for me. It's typically in June. But you will enjoy Wisconsin. I think the last time I was there was in Madison. I think we had an NWA meeting. Were you not at that one, Rick? The Madison meeting? I think that was in what?
2012.
2012
or 13.
Yeah.
I can't remember.
I didn't get to
Was
go
it 12 or
there.
13? Because we went to Charleston. I think that was 12. And then let's look and see.
I think it was 12.
Yeah, I did check.
13.
It was the first one after Birmingham.
Cam, are you going to this Milwaukee shindig?
I am. I'm really excited. My travel authorization was a little bit of a question mark. Starting my job a week ago, I had to get, a Fed process moved through, but I think we're good. That's at least what we suspect is happening. So I'm excited, Rick, to be there in Wisconsin with you for your first trip ever up there. That's really exciting. I didn't know it was your first trip.
Yeah, and 2 weeks from now, I get to go to Madison for the National WCM conference. So my whole life, I've never been, and going 2 times in 2 weeks. So pretty awesome.
Madison might be a little bit better for the cheese stuff. They have just a whole lot of the, prized places to go there. But I think we can still show you some good Wisconsin fare. Harold,
some cheese curds. Get the cheese curds,
right?
Rick.
Yeah, cheese curds, absolutely. Harold and I are already plotting. So
yeah, and a couple of quick. Now I'm hearing that like scanner traffic, somebody's channel, and Bill Murray, I think you're on the wrong microphone too. You've got that
that's probably
sounding nasty audio here. So, but yeah, no, I had a great time in Madison. I just found out I will be good. It's great that these things are starting back up again. We're starting to see each other again. I just accepted an invitation to speak up in Linden student chapter of the AMS, Northern Vermont University. It'll be in March. I'm going to be the speaker. Yeah, I typically do one conference every spring. It's hard to do it in spring, and I warn them, in March where I am, it's a crapshoot. We might be in a horrible tornado event, but I just like going to college campuses where I've not had a chance to visit before, and I love to learn from young students. I love this next generation. I just think they're outstanding. But anyway, we should note that Troy is traveling tonight, and Jen is busy with severe weather. Having said that, Bill Murray, let's bring in our guest. Let's get this sucker on the road.
Yeah, am I sounding better now, James? That I've got the right microphone?
Sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, tonight's guest is a suggestion of some guy named James Spann. We occasionally get an email from this guy. But he recommended that we reach out to tonight's guest, WeatherBrain, and we did, because we reviewed his TED Talk that he did at the University of Tulsa about storm chasing. It was very interesting, so I thought we would have him on the show tonight. And his name is not a typo. It is really his name. He tells us that. I think his parents must have had quite the sense of humor. But Larry Snow Fleury, welcome to the show.
Hey, I appreciate it. How's it going?
It's going pretty well. We chatted on Saturday night. You're out in Denver working and making stuff happen. But it looks like you're back home tonight. Where is home, Larry?
Home is in Northwest Arkansas right now, Bentonville to be specific. I'm originally from Pittsburgh, Kansas, about an hour and a half northwest from here, a little bit south of Kansas City, about 25 minutes from Joplin, Missouri. So we're right on that Missouri-Kansas border, near the I-44 corridor over there. But home is humid right now. So comparative to Colorado and anything out west, it's a fun treat to come back home, but also kind of a sweaty one as well.
Kim had a knowing look there as you were describing your growing up and college era there. So Kim, jump.
Well, I was just excited. I've been there. I know people probably hear Pittsburgh, Kansas and go, where? But I actually have been up there a number of times. My best friend teaches for Pitt State up there too. They have a meteorology program that has put through a number of people who've done very well in our field as well. So while it's not a place that people maybe have heard of, it is on the map for some of us.
Absolutely. I love Pittsburgh, Kansas. I grew up there. I was born in Albuquerque, New Mexico, but my dad's side of the family all lived in Southeast Kansas. So we migrated out there when I was a kid and been there ever since. So, and I met a lot of great, storm chasers. We probably know the same person who you're talking about. So it's a great community for sure.
So what was your degree in, Larry?
Yeah, so I went for environmental geography. Initially kind of focusing more on that GIS side for mapping and especially I wanted to get more into the atmospheric science world from that kind of visual perspective. But things kind of changed and I decided to kind of take more of a marketing visual standpoint. So when it comes to storm chasing and the outdoors, I focus more on the visuals and video and photography, a lot of documentation, but there's still a lot of science obviously behind that. So initially environmental geography, but took some of the meteorology courses and environmental urban geography. You kind of have to take them all in congruence with each other, but definitely a good time.
We continue to watch, what's going on in Chicago. You had something, Rick, you saw in chat. What did you hear?
Looks like Midway Airport's gusting nearly to 70 miles an hour at about 10 after 7. So still a nasty storm.
I don't know that I've ever heard Tom Skilling do tornado coverage, but I was just listening out of the corner of my ear there for a second. And it really was interesting to hear him. Kim, I know you probably got a lot of experience, maybe more than you bargained for, listening to Tom Skillings do severe weather coverage.
I did. Yeah. Early in life, growing up in the Chicago suburbs, I sure did. He was wonderful to listen to. He's a really calming presence, very knowledgeable, just kind of a classic. So I'm sure the people in Chicago feel well taken care of, as much as this is looking a little bit exciting getting into the city.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, it looks like that hook may have kind of settled out a little bit, but it could be cycling. So still pretty interesting velocity couplet coming toward the lake now. So it's going to be interesting. So that will be crazy. Now, Larry, did I hear you say the word miserable with marketing, or did I mishear that?
There's definitely a undertone to that sometimes. But marketing has its good days and bad days. And I've actually was talking to the lacrosse technology company. They make some weather stations. I was talking to them out in Denver at this outdoor summit that they hold in Denver at the Denver Convention Center. So we were talking about that. Most of those people are more tech focused though. So they weren't really anything I threw their way. They were like, nah, we just kind of do coding. So it was a lot of fun though. But yeah, I am watching this Chicago radar as well. The velocity is pretty wild looking. So
yeah, and I don't know who Tom's associate is. He's on air now on WGN, but yeah, he's a fine gentleman, Kim, that's for sure. You meet him at any of these conferences, and the 2 times he's been on this show, he just was such an amazing guest in both cases. And we certainly love him dearly. So talk about how you got the weather bug. I mean, I guess you can hardly miss in the places you lived, but not everybody catches it. What did it for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Growing up in Southeast Kansas, you see weather coming through the plains all the time. And I think there's just some sort of wild visual element to it where you get excited. And especially when you're younger, you kind of see the same sort of clouds day in and day out. But on occasion, you get these roll clouds, these shelf clouds. And when you're a child, that's definitely something that's kind of wild looking. My father is probably like any other father in the Midwest, who's like, I'm going to look out the window. I might run out to the yard, but everyone else, please go inside. And as a kid, your curiosity goes like, well, what are you looking at? So as I got older, that bug definitely stuck with me. And I think I just fascinated by something that's constantly changing daily, hourly, every minute. So, and it's something that affects everybody. I mean, it's not specific to one person. It's specific to everyone who's alive. We all experience weather, and whether it's good or devastating. So,
are there any events in your experience that were more memorable in your younger days?
There was a tornado that came through Parsons, Kansas. I think it was in 90. I can't remember the year, so you have to forgive me, but it was in the mid 90s. I know it was about EF3, and the destruction hit part of the town of Parsons, Kansas. So when you go through, it's such a small town that when they're like, oh, that's a nice Burger King, it's because, well, they built a lot of things new. When I got older, when I was in college, I lived next to Joplin, Missouri. So on May, in May of 2011, I'm sorry, we saw that tornado event happening, the development right over Pittsburgh. And so we went over there, and by the time we got there, it already touched down, landed, and did its devastation. So we kind of took some chainsaws and tried to help the community from that aspect. But, most of the National Guard and Red Cross are saying, stay back, let us kind of monitor the situation. If we need community assistance, we'll definitely reach out. And later on that week, obviously, it was much needed. But yeah, I think the Joplin tornado was definitely the biggest event in terms of my career on the road, seeing that.
Yeah, it was such a terrible day, and one that we all remember, and especially coming on the heels of the super outbreak in the Deep South on April 27th. It really was a terrible 1-2 punch that year, and something we all remember. Talk about that day for a minute. I mean, it's hard to gloss over that subject. It's still shocking to me. You always imagine that we, probably might one day have an event that would kill 100 people, and then, one tornado, and then it happens and you're still shocked. And this is the question you ask in your TED Talk. How is it that people die in tornadoes today, given all the technology points? We'll come back to that in a second, but talk about how that day unfolded. And, there's been some criticism of the Weather Service in Springfield from some quarters. And I'd like to have you weigh in on, on that criticism, whether it was warranted, justified, or, what your opinion of it is.
Yeah, I know. I mean, they were monitoring the situation. I know the storm kind of initially developed in that Ohio Valley area, and then moved down into the Southwest Missouri area when it fully developed into a supercell situation. In terms of the National Weather Service, I deal with a good friend of mine, Doug Hetty, out of KOAM here in Pittsburgh, Kansas. He does stuff with, Brian Busby out of Kansas City and Gary Lazick. They kind of run a little service together called Weather 2020. I deal with them a lot and talk with them. And we kind of talked about the situation before, about the Joplin situation. And I'd say Doug was just like James here, where when the event happens, he was on air for much earlier than the event and stayed on hours and hours into the late night, watching that storm push through Southwest Missouri going east. There was significant warning. I mean, obviously, it was devastating. I don't think they expected it to be as devastating. Like you said, an event that kills 100 or more people is something no one looks forward to or expects. And I think the ending number was 162 in terms of total deaths. I know it was the fourth most. I know it's the most costliest tornado in terms of damage in history, and excuse me, and the whole town was just devastated. Going to college at Pittsburgh State University, it seems like every other college student you meet had a horror story, or there's a case study of people just, they hear the signs, they hide in the bathtub, someone knocks on their neighbor's door, pulls them next door, and then that half of the apartment complex is destroyed while their half is just fine. And you hear these, I'm sure, all over the world. And I'm sure with the May 27th event, you've heard similar stories. But I think when you personalize these issues, it becomes much more intense. From a storm spotter or a meteorologist perspective, there's a lot of scientific backing, a lot of, we're looking at radar, here's what's happening. But we can't forget that there's people involved behind these things, and they have very personalized stories. So I could say 162 people died, but each of those people's families have, a very specific and long story to tell, and they're all very important.
I had never heard this story, and maybe Rick and Neil and Kim had heard it, maybe James, about the butterfly people of Joplin, which is sort of a supernatural story about angels or some being that appeared to a lot of people, apparently, in terms of a vision. Talk about that, because that was news to me. Had you heard of that? Obviously you had, because you posted it on your social media, and then maybe, Kim and some of the others can kind of join in and talk about it, because I thought that was kind of an interesting story.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. The first time I heard about it was much later, actually, after the Joplin event. I just remember seeing all these butterfly murals popping up around Joplin, and different street artists and local community members putting up butterflies in their yard. And I was like, well, what's the deal with this butterfly story? And there's reported that a lot of children, especially during the tornado, saw some sort of butterfly people. They couldn't quite describe them, but they're like, oh, there's these people with wings, and they, kept us safe in these situations. As you said, this sort of supernatural event, however anyone wants to take that, but it gave the community some hope, and I think that's what they needed. Joplin is a city that definitely focused on the hope concept. Their Joplin High School got hit directly by the tornado, and the front sign took out the J and LIN in Joplin and left the OP, and someone put up an H and an E at the end to make it hope. And that was kind of a driving force behind that community. So I think with that butterfly people, whether it's angels or an imagination situation or a real situation, overlapped with the hope concept. I think the underlying thing is the community moved forward, and they didn't take it as like, our community's over. I know they used Joplin as a case study for how quickly they put together everything and rebuilt that community. So the butterfly story is super interesting. I thought it was fascinating. I posted it online. A lot of people seem to gravitate to that story. And I think that hope concept is really what's behind that.
Kim, you mentioned that you had not heard that specific story. Have you heard other similar stories in your research and in the post-storm environment of people sharing things like that?
Interesting. This is one aspect of the experience that I haven't had a lot of people mention anything about, and I hadn't heard the folklore from Joplin, so I was just looking it up, committing some of it to memory because it is really interesting. I've heard of similar phenomenon, for other kinds of near-death experiences. I think it's not uncommon for people to see manifestations of things like angels and to report stuff like that. But something so specific like a butterfly is just really interesting. So thank you for sharing that. I hadn't heard that, and I haven't heard anything like that in other tornadoes.
Well,
Yeah,
Let me say this,
Kim has an amazing ability to put in English what I'm trying to think of and say. So thank you for that, Kim. James, I know you probably have some experience in this area.
Well, I was just going to say, when people tell those stories, I believe every word they say. And there's a lot of people in the weather enterprise that just blow them off as kooks or, crazed people that have some type of psychological disorder. And they're just, I believe every word they say. I have been around so many people that have been through horrific tornadoes, and they will share stories, maybe not exactly like this one, but similar stories. And like Kim, there's a lot of NDE stories. And I believe them all. And I think we should give them the ability to share without being mocked by anybody in the weather enterprise, because things do happen that don't have a good explanation. And again, most people know that I'm a Christian, and immediately I'm branded a kook by some people. But those of us that have faith know that there are things that do happen that we can't explain. And so I've not heard that story either. Most of the ones I deal with involve NDEs right after the tornado happens, where those people that survived had a chance to see their son or their daughter or their mom or their dad one more time. And the stories are just riveting. And I believe every word they say. So I love to hear stories like that. To me, it's an encouragement in the middle of a horrible, horrible situation.
Yeah, and I'm with you. Absolutely, where these traumatic events definitely bring out something that's not a kook story to me. In terms of anyone going through trauma, they have to find a way to get through that, especially when a devastating weather event happens. I think, and especially young children. I mean, they don't know what's going on. Anyone who goes through this, it's horrific. And children aren't fully developed in terms of their brains and their body. So having to live through that is something that will live with them forever. And like you said, I mean, some things we might say is sub-rational in the weather community, where it could be super irrational. It's beyond our rationality at the moment. So that's kind of where I stand. So, yeah.
In fact, I'm going to challenge Bill to get Ari Hallmark on the show. Okay. My guest booking officer here. Ari is 17 now. She was 6 when her parents, 2 of her grandparents, and her cousin were killed in the same house. And Ari had an NDE where she got a chance to see her parents one more time, and her therapist encouraged her to write a book about it. And she did. It's a very fascinating book. And I think it's still on Amazon, and the money goes to, some great ministries and nonprofits and causes. But I would love to have it. And I don't know, I think it's been long enough, Bill. It's been 11 years and I've talked with her for a long, long, long time, and we've had great conversations. And I don't know if she's quite ready to do a show like this, and again, part of the fear, it's the fear of being mocked. And, it's a sad point in society where, people just, they're afraid to say anything because they're going to be attacked, and somehow it becomes political, and it's a Trump and it's a Biden. This has nothing to do with any of that stuff. It's just fascinating. And so maybe she'll consider coming on the show sometime, but I would love to have her or maybe others like her that have had those type experiences just to talk about it. And again, it puts a human face on these tragedies, because everybody on this show are numbers people. Everybody here, we can work with numbers, and most of us were pretty darn good with numbers. But it really helps to put a face on those numbers when it comes to tornado disasters. And, Kim is really good at this. She's been to so many of these horrific situations and look people face to face. She knows what I mean. So just a suggestion, Bill, not, and she might not be ready to do this. She should be she should be a senior this coming year in high school.
I will definitely make some inroads and see what we can do, James, because I share that. Dr. Neal, is there anything you wanted to share from your personal experience?
Yeah. So I you guys know this. I died in 2016. And they it was at the emergency room, and so it was at least 8 minutes that they were trying to get a heart rate, and they ended up shocking me, and I came back. I don't know how long I was out before they found me, because I actually blacked out in the parking lot. But you know, I saw stuff I can't explain, which has always been weird to me. But I can say that it was a really, really calming, peaceful experience. But as a scientist, I'm torn between being able to try to figure out how to explain that with endorphins and all sorts of, you know, they talk about people only when they're conscious, only using like 10 for 15% of their brain. What kind of mental capabilities would you have if you could tap into the other remainder of it? I mean, I like to think there's something out there. There's certainly stuff that I can't explain, but I don't know that it can't be explained by science in the future. But, you know, the other part of me just sits around thinking, if I could just use 100% of my brain, like I could use the force to like move objects and stuff. And I keep trying that, you know, but it won't work. I need better Jedi training. But yeah, I got super sick at an AMS meeting and ended up having an infected tonsil that closed off my airways and suffocated me. So stories.
And Neal, you shared this story before. Are you different because of that experience? Did anything change physically or mentally about you?
Sure. I 100% feel like I'm in a bonus round here. I literally on life, I don't have really much to lose. So I don't try not to take anything for granted, although I feel like I do anyway, because I get caught up in like the everyday routine. But you have to go back and think about that kind of stuff. I mean, I've had other couple of close calls over the years where I probably shouldn't be here. So I think a lot of people are like that. They just need to look back and remember that any second one of us could disappear. So just try to make every day like it would be your last.
And I'll share one more boring personal story. I mean, I feel like I've cheated the system. I'm like Neal. I didn't code. I didn't die. But when I was in first grade, it was the year of the Cuban Missile Crisis. This was 1962. This is how old I am. And we had nukes in Cuba aimed at the Southeast United States. And they taught us how to get into these little wooden desks. And I'm thinking, what good is this going to do? Me and my friends, we made a pact. We were going to go out on the playground and watch the end of the world with a front row seat. And then at the same time, some of the high school kids started going to some place called Vietnam. We didn't know what that was or where it was, but some of those guys weren't coming back. And I never, ever, ever thought I would live to be 18. Never. Mm-hmm. And so that changed me when I got to be a little older. And I think I've appreciated every day of life, maybe more than others, because of the stuff I went through back in the 60s. And so, you know, it's the same kind of thing. And I think we all need to just sit back and, you know, appreciate the day. Goodness gracious. We're so busy, you know, doing stuff. And I understand that. I'm the same way. I'm like Neal. I mean, some days I'm so busy, I just can't appreciate it. But goodness, I'm an old man and I'm doing what I love. And I have always done every day what I've loved to do. And I've never worked a day in my life. And it's just been great. So I think we should all, maybe those of us that do weather, as hard as it has become now, just to be thankful for the opportunity. Bill, sorry, I mean to preach. I get
No, we love when you preach on, brother. Yeah, it occurs to me in instances like this morning, James, you know, it was a major accident on I-59. You know, I don't know if there were any fatalities, but, you know, certainly there were injuries and, you know, terrible things. And you're just one moment you're driving along thinking everything's normal. And then suddenly the situation is just out of control. You know, it may be a situation beyond your control. It may be an error you made or whatever. But, you know, suddenly you're staring death in the face. And that is a real sobering and humbling feeling, because like you said, James, it could happen at any minute. And like Dr. Neal said, we're, you know, a lot of us are in bonus rounds, you know, whether we really went through that experience or not. We're certainly grateful. You know, Kim, you've been close enough to your share of tornadoes there in Norman, for sure. But it really is. I think about these children and Uvalde, and that terrible experience. And fortunately, we have seemed to have some common sense compromise coming, in the gun. I don't know what the right word is. There's a proper branding word for it, but because we've got to have some common sense come to that. But I think about those children and what they went through, and how if they survived, they're scarred for life. If they passed away, what a terrible experience it would have had to have been. And I can't imagine that. But these are just humbling thoughts. And I didn't mean for us to get on such a somber topic, but it's an important part of what we do, because it is life or death.
Well, if we have to understand the importance of human life. If we do this job right, at least on my level, and I think even from where Neil is, the NWP czar, the bottom line of numerical weather prediction is successful forecast with high impact events, giving people notice and giving people warning, and respecting human life, and mitigating the loss of human life. That's why we're all here. Everybody on this show, this in the weather enterprise, everybody. And no matter if you're at the top, PhD level, like Neil and Kim, or you're a practitioner down here where I am, it's the same thing. And so I just think sometimes we just should stop. And I don't mind us reflecting for a few minutes on this. I know we chase some rabbits here, but that's what we do on this show.
Well, and for me, it sprang from a tremendous fear for a lot of us also. It went through events, but for me, it was very traumatic to not have that information. When I was a child, staying with my grandparents or my aunt, they lived out in the country, and weather information was not readily available. And it petrified me, that the only thing standing between me and, a tornado was, my mom on one end of the manufactured home and my aunt on the other, looking to the southwest to see what was coming. It really, sprang, from that I needed to understand maps, and I needed to understand, how this stuff worked. And so that's even, more important to me today. And Larry, you raised this in your TED Talk. How in the world are people still dying? As smart as all these brains are on this show, and the other thousands of weather professionals that are out there, and you offered some insight into how maybe we could, make a step in the right direction for some people.
Yeah, absolutely. I focused on kind of three main points in that talk. Initially was having some sort of situational awareness, some sort of education, and some sort of purpose. Just to kind of highlight each of those real quick. When I talk about education, I don't mean everyone has to go out and get their PhD in atmospheric science or meteorology, but take a Skywarn course. They're offered every late winter into the spring, and depending on your location. I really am a proponent of everyone should be a spotter. Not everyone should be a chaser. Not everyone needs to be congesting the roads. And if you're not out there for a specific reason, be kind of your backyard guardian, kind of point that out to your community. We have neighborhood watches. Why can't we have a neighborhood Skywarn group where your community gets around and says, hey, the weather, is forecasted to be a little rough this evening. So these groups have basements. Let's work on a plan of action. So I think it would be great to, kind of communicate to these EMS emergency management groups and kind of build these plans of action. So yeah, having some sort of education, knowing what to look for in the sky. I know the biggest thing in terms of weather and severe weather, I think the two biggest things are overinflation, kind of the boy who cried wolf situation, where people are like, oh, there's tornado warnings all the time in this area. Well, I hear the sirens. We're just going to sit and watch TV. You interrupted my bachelorette. I don't care. And the situation can be gnarly, and these people are dismissing it. Where on the other end, if you don't report enough, they're like, well, you underreported the situation. More could have been done. So everyone's always arguing. There's a lot of drama, especially in the weather world. Like, oh, do we need more sirens, or we have phones? But some people don't look at their phones. I texted a good friend from work the other day, sent him a few texts like, do you want to grab dinner? He didn't even look at his phone for hours. So what are the odds he's turning on his notifications for, NWS weather alerts or amber alerts. And like I said, I remember that situation in Hawaii when they said some missiles were going to strike within the next 30 minutes. And I had a friend living there freaking out and just having a good day. And then all of a sudden their life changed. And they kind of feel like you do, Neil, where they feel like they have a second chance, even though nothing happened. It was terrifying. And I think, especially in the Midwest and the Central Plains, we get this concept of like, well, tornado warnings, I'm not going to worry about it. Especially in the Joplin, Northwest Arkansas, Springfield kind of metropolitan area, we get this concept like we're always going to be safe. I haven't been hit by lightning, or I haven't been hit by a tornado, so odds are in my favor. But it doesn't work like that. We saw with Andover, Kansas, not too long ago, where that tornado ripped through the neighborhoods and suburbs around Wichita. So education, yes, initially have some sort of background. Secondly, situational awareness.
I was going to just say something there. I've always been the opposite. Every tornado has always, my entire life, all 60 years I've been going to get me. I had to prove to myself that it wasn't before I was comfortable. And I hope some of that has rubbed off on our children, and I'm glad of that, because they'll come around when the weather's bad and they know, we're working a severe weather event, they'll want to look at the radar and say, is that one coming near us? They want to know that it's not. And if you tell them it's not, they trust that, we know what we're talking about, that we're okay. They go on and they're fine. But if, it's like, no, keep your shoes close, and, we may be going downstairs here shortly, they know to respect that. And I think we're the ambassadors of that, especially as parents. A lot of times, James, it's the other way. The kids are teaching the parents to be ready in your experience doing your school groups.
Yep. Kids often lead the way. They really do.
So keep going there. You talked about education. That's critical.
And just to point out what you said,
great tool.
In terms of education too, I think some people turn to social media as some form of education, and it's absolutely not. It's a great place to communicate what's going on. Like you said, if you say a tornado is coming, I trust you. But you also get a lot of hype and hyperbole online of like, the situation is happening, it's going to be the worst thing in 2 weeks, and you're scaring the community. So there's awareness and scare tactics, and we see that a lot online. So I'm always, in terms of like outdoor meteorological ethics, take some sort of central ground and be like, trust your local meteorologist. Don't trust your local Facebook group every time. Turn to reliable people. To kind of move forward, situational awareness was something I always point forward. If I say, if you drive north for a number of miles when you should have been going south, you probably shouldn't be out chasing storms. If you're very directionally challenged, I've had moments like that where I'm like, okay, this is east, this is west. And then all of a sudden I'm like, okay, I'm actually northeast, northwest. And that can make a big difference when you're out in the field, watching severe weather approaching. So having some sort of situational awareness is very, very important. And I point out in my TED Talk a personal story of how I was a little too close to a situation. A microburst situation happened. Luckily, I pulled over in this kind of abandoned Christmas tree farm parking lot. And if I kept going down that road I was on, every power line, a lot of trees were down, some roofs were taken off. I could have had that. I don't think I would have been hurt, but again, I don't know. It's one of those situations that you're thankful for that you took some sort of initiation. So being proactive and not reactive. And I think that's
ask the panel that's a good place to ask that question. Have you ever found yourself in a situation maybe where you didn't maintain your situational awareness enough to keep yourself out of danger? Kim, Rick, Neil, James, have you ever been in a dangerous situation that you weren't ready for from a weather standpoint?
Not really. I mean,
I can't think of one either.
With me, we did things when I was a kid we shouldn't do. I mean, back when I was a teenager, when I could drive, we started, blanketing the western side of my home county with people, we shouldn't be doing that. We had no idea what we were doing, but we never got into trouble doing that. I will say that one time John Oldshoe did. Our friend Oldshoe, when he was working here, this was in 2000. John was a meteorologist on the staff here, and John was in one of our chase vehicles, if you will. And there was a monitor in the vehicle, and we had a tornado, a large one, live on one of the cameras. And John just started to watch, and he was enthralled by watching that video. We all were. But quite frankly, he forgot where he was. I mean, he was in the direct path of that thing. And by the grace of God, he realized it. And he and this photographer dashed into a Hampton Inn and banged on the door, and they let him in. And it took that vehicle and just tossed it and turned it. And so it can happen. You know, it can happen to any of us.
That day, James, will always stick in my memory because the coverage was so good, and your sky cam showed that tornado clearly immediately. And I, looked, to where I thought it was going to go. I was in Birmingham, but it was heading for, one of our hotels, which was one exit down from the one that John ended up at. And I literally was sick to my stomach. I called that hotel and said, look, you got about 10 minutes. You got to get everybody down. You got to get in the place. I really thought it was the end of them. And I just sat there with this sick worry the whole time. And then, it was announced that it hit a hotel. And of course, I thought the worst. But it was, one exit up at the Hampton Inn. And John thought he was just going to run in that hotel, James, but they had locked the doors. Or the doors, right. I guess, were, the side doors were locked, and he thought he was just going to run in there and be safe. Fortunately, they heard him frantically, banging on the door, and they let him in. And to their credit, the folks in the Hampton had lined the hallways with mattresses and had put all the guests in the hallway. They'd gone that extra step, and the hotel did sustain a good bit of damage, but everyone was safe and no one was injured, which was the hope. So, we were kind of sitting around here in the chat thinking about had we ever, because I can't recall the time except on April 27th. And it's not lack of situational awareness. It was stupidity that I finally realized the Tuscaloosa to Birmingham tornado was going to come right to our office. And I had waited too late to send anybody anywhere. And we were sitting ducks. And so we had to do an impromptu last minute shelter build in the middle of the office. But, it reminded me that, in that situation, I should have been thinking an hour out that we were in danger. I was more concerned about communicating information. Neil, you mentioned a story that you've had while fishing. Why don't you share it?
Yeah, before I get to the fishing story, I wouldn't say it was a lack of situational awareness, but I had a pretty close near-death experience in mainland Mexico, just getting a 3-wave hold down. But I knew what I was getting myself into. But that's just kind of the risks of doing that kind of stuff. But I was out fishing one time with my dad, and we used to go out fishing off South Florida all the time. And a line of storms went racing off the coast. And it was at the speed it was coming at us. There was no way we were going to be able to crank up the motor and get around it in either going north or south. And we weren't going to outrun it going further offshore. So we kind of picked the area that looked like it had the least intense convection and then tried to head towards it. And then when we got up near it, just cut the motor off, put on life vests in case, and the concern was getting struck by lightning. Put the motor in the water, so the props down, just hopefully that would, if it struck, it would actually hit the motor and go and ground it and go to the other end of it. It was like a 20-foot skiff, so the other end is not very far. And just wait it out. And lightning, I don't know exactly how this happened, but lightning struck the water all around us, despite us being probably the highest thing out there. And we never got struck. But I thought for sure, there's no way we're not going to get hit. and it passed. And then I look back on that, and this is the kind of thing that happens every single afternoon with the sea breeze. So but that was just one of those things where you're in that situation, and then it's like, well, maybe you could have avoided it by not going out. But once you're there, and then you just try to deal with it and do the smartest thing you can do given what you're dealing with.
Yeah,
but that was scary. I mean, lightning scares me a lot more than other weather phenomenon, just because it's one of the least predictable things.
Yeah, I had a similar experience on a lake or on a river with family members, in a boat that didn't want to go in and didn't want to come in, and the only telltales, in this event were the building cumulus clouds, and we waited a little too late. And I feel what you're talking about, because racing across that lake, you just feel like you're a target. James, there was a father and son who were either seriously injured or killed on the river near Demopolis several years ago. Do you remember that story? I've seen references to it. I've never researched it, but they were racing to get back to shore during a thunderstorm. And the story was that they were killed. And I thought that was, pretty horrible, and certainly a lesson that we need to all remember. Yeah.
Vaguely, but I'm afraid of one thing when it comes to weather, and it's lightning. I mean, I'm afraid of one thing. Let me tell you what, JB Elliott and I, during Hurricane Opal, okay, this was in 1995, we walked out behind the TV station. At the time, I was working on Red Mountain at Channel 6 here. And, typically with warm core tropical systems, there's not much lightning. There's just not much. And goodness gracious, it hit that big WBRC sign on Red Mountain. And we literally could feel the hair on our arms coming up. And it was so loud, you couldn't hear anything for a couple of minutes. And it was horrifying, just horrifying. And yeah, listen, if I hear thunder, I'm in. If it's within 8 miles, I'm in. Coaching baseball, whatever. Y'all can play baseball all night. My guys are done. That's the one thing. I'm very anal about lightning.
That's good. That's a good thing to be anal about. Rick Smith, you were going to share?
Yeah, talking about situational awareness and getting in trouble, and this kind of relates to some of Larry's points that he's made about safety and situational awareness when you're spotting and chasing. I had a couple of experiences while storm chasing back around 99, 98, 2000. I can't remember the year, but one that left a lasting impression was near Happy, Texas. And we were the opposite of anything close to happy during this event, because we were trying to get close to a storm, not paying attention to the roads. And this was before the days of Google Maps and radar scope and all that. So we're going off audio descriptions of the storm by ham radio or the radio, AM, FM radio, whatever. So we're trying to get close to the storm. We're turning here, turning there, turning here. Before we know it, we're on a gravel road that becomes a dirt road. And then the core of the storm overtakes us there, and we're mired down to the axles almost in mud. And second supercell passed over us with hail. And the only time in my life I've ever had to think about making that decision, okay, I know we say to get out of the car, but am I really going to get out of the car right now? Because I don't think I am. And anyway, a farmer found us, pulled us out with his tractor. I'm not ashamed to say I literally got out and kissed the pavement when we got back to the main road. That was a situation I will never repeat again. But it was due to lack of situational awareness, not knowing where we were on the roads, what the roads were like, and not keeping up close enough where we were in relation to the storm. So could have ended up really, really bad.
Yeah, absolutely. And something outside of just the tornado and heavy winds and lightning aspect, people forget flooding is one of the main reasons people die in weather-related events. We saw those OU students who recently passed away after a storm chase in Andover, Kansas, heading back down to Oklahoma. They automobile accidents. That's just kind of sporadic driving, or there could be other people. But I mean, there's other issues outside of weather-related issues. There could be people. There could be traffic events. There could be dirt roads, like you said. So there's so many situations. I think if you're not, and situational awareness applies to everything. So I could be the best storm spotter in the world. I could be focusing on Doppler radio, and I could be focusing on the Doppler, I could be focusing on the road, I could see the rotation, but then totally drive off the road while doing it. And I think we do need people, like Reed Timmer and people who are going into these storms and getting valuable data, but not everyone can do that. And I think people see it and they're like, well, if he could do it, I could do it. I think everyone should be out there, should be aware. But, with the case study of like Tim Samaras, Paul Samaras, Carl Young, all those people, you could be brilliant. You could be out there for all the right reasons and things still happen. So I'm always pointing that out. Just nothing's going to be perfect in these situations all the time. So safety should always be on the back of your mind.
It's interesting you mentioned that even experts can get themselves into trouble with a lot of these kinds of events. Just because you're an expert in, one area of the field, it doesn't mean that translates to your constant awareness of every weather hazard. For example, I have a really fun example that I might have shared on WeatherBrains previously, but definitely relates to this. I was thinking about, man, what are my situation awareness stories where I totally just had none? And I knew that I had a good story. And Larry, when you mentioned flooding, it brought it back. This is mine. There was a flash flooding event, a massive flash flooding event in Edmond, Oklahoma, just east of Oklahoma City in 2010, June of 2010. And I was driving from Norman up to Edmond for an appointment in the morning. What I hadn't known was that there had been something like 11 inches of rain. There'd been, sort of this pivot point to a mesoscale complex, and it pivoted just right over that area, dumped this enormous amount of rain in just a couple of hours overnight. And a lot of people were trying to get into the city to, on their commute. And I saw that I-35 was just jammed. And by the time I got up to 35 and 40, I just thought, okay, silly Oklahoma drivers, something is going on here that I don't know. There's like a cow loose or something. I'm going to just go around all of this. And I had zero idea, right, of what had happened. Norman was completely clear, just 25 miles south of all of this all night. So, just another great example of when you're driving, you sometimes have no idea what you're driving into. But as I'm going along these side roads, I kept trying to get north and east. I start seeing, water running along the side of the road in these pretty big drainage ditches that we have in a lot of places in Oklahoma because our soil doesn't absorb water. So there were, just these little rivers running next to the road. And I kind of thought, there's water. Yeah, it must have rained here. Great. And I get up to very close to Edmond, and I had kind of topped a hill. It's a little bit of a hilly area. And I look down and there's some cars floating. You'd think at this point I would have thought, I need to get out of here. But it wasn't then when I made that decision. I thought, oh gosh, I should try to get around this. I was still focused on getting to my appointment. I thought that it was a localized issue. Again, had no idea that water was moving over the landscape. And I turned back, and the road that I had just come on, water was starting to crisscross it. And I still persisted. I turned toward my destination, which was the area that was flooded. And it was only when I tried to turn up the next road and I was passed by a fire truck, came to the top of a hill and looked down and saw there was a school bus floating and like 7-8 cars underwater under this like highway overpass. That's when it clicked with me. I'm in a flash flood. This is a flash flood. I don't know why, but it's very bad and I need to get out of here. And what was funny was that entire time that I was trying to navigate off the side roads, I didn't have a smartphone at the time and I wanted to be efficient and get there. The one person that I knew who would definitely be awake at that point was actually the road weather program manager at NCAR. And he was this really early riser. And I called him, and he had no idea what was going on either. He was directing me around all these roads where there was very obvious signs, right, of road hazards, the kinds of things he was developing tools to detect and have cars share information about. So your point about expertise is very well taken. At the end of the day, we're all human. And so, I think it's good to try to be aware of our environment and not doubt that we might be seeing something extraordinary, because there are layers a lot of us have to go through to really process what we're seeing.
And you have to pay attention to those barricades and detours because they're there for a reason. And even when they're not there, just the presence of the water. My flooding story relates to Oklahoma too, and Tropical Storm Bill several years ago that washed out I-35 there between the Ardmore area and Oklahoma City. I was hell bent to get to the National Weather Association, mid-year, meeting in Oklahoma City. And I knew we had 10 inches of rain the night before, but I still got up thinking I was going to drive to Oklahoma City. And I ran into every roadblock there was for about 3 or 4 hours. I finally punted and went back home and waited for the waters to recede. But I came on this stretch of highway where there were Oklahoma State troopers on either side. You could see, but there were 3 cars partially submerged and a van in that water. People had obviously driven into it earlier, and I just hoped and prayed that those people were safe and in one piece. But I couldn't imagine getting caught in that. What a terrifying thing to be trapped in a car by rising water. Those 911 calls that come from things like that just absolutely haunt me. So that's kind of interesting.
Did you see today that Yellowstone National Park had some major flooding and they had to shut down the park to all entrances in or out due to road closures and these roads falling apart? It's pretty wild looking.
Yeah, one of my business associates, Ryan Morgan, told me that story. I was more fixed on the winter storm watch in western Montana yesterday, but to even realize that, I saw there were huge flash flood watches in that same area. So it's a scary time up there, and to imagine Yellowstone at its peak season getting closed would be terrible. Our guest from last week would probably have something to say about that. Admiral Titley, he was fabulous.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. And just kind of to move on from so I talked about education, situational awareness, and lastly, it was purpose. You see a lot of people just out there, for maybe the adrenaline rush. But you see people who are out there for specific reasons. They're gathering data, they're doing documentation, they're confirming rotation that they see on radar. So it's always good to have the eyes in the skies, but some people might cause, as they call it, storm chaser convergence. You could have hundreds of cars on the road, and one guy pulls over, so another guy pulls over, and people are like, what's going on? I'll pull over. And some people might not know why people are pulled over. They think something's going on. And usually most of the time, these people are bright. They know what they're doing. They're out of harm's way. But I think it could cause congestion. And as we saw, someone, passed away due to chasing right off a freeway, I believe, and pulling over on the side and getting hit by a semi of some sorts. And these things happen, and it's unfortunate. But I think there's ways to mitigate and kind of limit that error. So those are kind of my big 3 points to kind of, go out there. And I'm not saying if you want to be like Reed Timmer and go out there and get close, I'm all for it. But definitely, that purpose is very important. Like if you're just out there just to have fun or be in people's way, you hear it all the time of people doing 90 miles an hour to get to a storm and get to it fast and run through stop signs. You see these things online, and it's unfortunate that we have to. I don't want meteorology and the storm chasing community to have a bad taste in its mouth to the general community. So I'm always a proponent and kind of showcasing that there's great uses for people like us out there. I go to elementary school sometimes, and they ask me to talk about, kind of my experience to some of these kids. And I try to do some basic lessons on like the Coriolis effect and just basic education. I show them pictures of scud clouds versus, a mesocyclone event, and see if they could tell the difference between certain things, or cold air funnels. And it's really fun to watch, their thought process on that. And they walk away, and I'm sure they go home and tell their parents like, well, this is what we learned, and here's what you should look for. And it's very basic, and to the point, kind of. But I think, the more we teach kids about this, the better the future generations are.
Hey, Larry, out there in the field, when you see all those red dots, you got this convergence going on here. I mean, what's it like? I mean, are there people out there, singing "Kumbaya"? Are there fist fights? I mean, what's it like? I mean, I see such a spectrum of personalities, and some are, tense, type A, and some are so laid back. What's it like when you've got 50 spotters in the same spot jockeying for position?
Yeah, and it's kind of exactly like that. I mean, it's jockeying for position. People want to you see a lot of people out there for visual purposes. They want to get the best photos, the best videos, time lapses. And some of them are great. And some of them you see like, hey, that's an old friend. Or I've talked to this person so many times online. Like, oh, there's Brett Wright, there's Michael Bensky. Like, hey, how's it going? Let's catch up. But then you see people who are just like, oh, we don't talk to them. There's so much drama even in that world. That you don't want to create some sort of divide, but everyone's out there for the same reason, but the purpose they're out there could be totally different. I think the biggest thing is parking becomes an issue. People will pull over. Some people are legitimately parking off the road. Some people have massive strobe lights on their vehicles, and people are saying, oh, I can't believe that person has that. I disagree with that. Some people are like, oh, you need that. That shows that they're out here for a reason, and they're showcasing not to get hurt on the road. So there's no right way to go towards it, I believe. But if there is a best way to attain that, I think it's to you find the people, and if there's going to be a situation, you follow the SBC, what's going to happen in the next few days. You kind of meet up and talk with some people and collab, like, hey, I'm going to be in this area. Let's find a plan of action. So I'm all about being proactive. You'll see reactive people out there who just showed up out of the blue. But if the people who are proactive, I think it's a very welcoming community. Less kumbaya, but definitely high fives. And I know it's a big thing to grab a steak dinner if you see a tornado actually hit the ground and rotation comes down, and they call that a successful day. It's not a bust. So they go out and they meet up afterwards at a steakhouse and kind of tell these stories of what went on throughout the day. So there's so many interesting people that, especially with the world and the internet right now, I meet so many people online who have great photography skills, great stories, great scientists. And you get to meet them at these events. And so it's kind of like these micro conventions in a very escalated situation sometimes.
I just sometimes, you see the movie Anchorman, Ron Burgundy and his anchor team. They're walking down the street, and then they see the other news team from the other channel, and they get into an anchor fight with, tridents and hand grenades. And, I could just see these chasers out there going into the news team assemble. And but it seems like it's mostly cordial, with maybe a few incidents.
I think the any drama too is a lot of it's so hush hush, where it's like, oh, there's that person. We'll be over here. They stay over there. It's not like Will Smith and Will Ferrell fighting an Anchorman. It's a very divided situation.
He stabbed a man in the heart.
Story.
I will say one piece of drama that I've picked up on that I didn't know was a thing, and I don't know if it was a thing until social media became a big part of all of this, but there's apparently a lot of drama around how men treat women in the storm chasing community. And so there's this whole community now of like women who chase, and it's this whole thing. And I feel like a lot of us who maybe, I guess we're old school chasers now, but I feel like there's just a bit of a generational divide on that. Maybe I think that there were definitely some women who early on in our science had real glass ceilings to break because it was very much a man's world. And that included storm chasing, absolutely. And there's some issues that need to be dealt with around keeping everybody safe when you're all doing, especially like field projects. I mean, it used to be that storm chasing was mostly this very difficult to enter, I would say like hobby, but it's much more than that, obsession. But it still was difficult to enter unless you had really specialized training and equipment. and now it's more open to others. And as that's happened, seeing this dynamic playing out, I don't know if Larry, you want to comment on this, but seeing that dynamic play out has been really disappointing. Just to hear that that's something that women are experiencing. And part of it to me, I think, is when I would go chase, I'd see people out on the road, and we all were just so excited to see one another. It was more rare that you would find people in the same place that you were, because we didn't have all of the little storm chaser dots on a map to just know where everybody was. And so it was a little bit more happenstance and maybe a little bit more fun, honestly. But yeah, I think that all these developments are really, really interesting, somewhat disappointing too.
And I think social media plays such a huge role in that, because I think in reality, if a beautiful, mothership looking shelf cloud approaches, I think it's just high fives all around, honestly, and everyone's excited to be there. But I think there is, once people get back to their computers or their phones, it's like, okay, this person did this, or we heard about this situation where this guy posted this amazing photo, but the way he approached the storm, he's running the stop signs and honking his horn or doing whatever. And it's like any community, like this person's harming our community. And I think a good way to go about that is, let's approach him gently. But what you see online is, let's ridicule these people publicly. And I think, it's always that's just kind of the loss of social media anymore. When it comes to women who chase, I'm all about that. I think everyone should, be loving weather as much as I do. I'm a fanatic in a way. And I have heard there's some divide there, but and I'm friends with chasers online, some prominent ones, a lot of females who say they've been harassed or dismissed, and it's very unfortunate to hear that. It's not something I see personally in my world, but when I see these kind of reports and case studies, it definitely tugs at the heart a little bit to be like, why would anyone do this? And people have different reasons to do what they do, but and like James said earlier, there's always we're talking about the butterfly people. People dismissing that, and there's always kind of a divide, I think, with anything. I remember when you had the guy from the Farmer's Almanac on your show a while back, and I know meteorologists around the country are like, well, is that a trustworthy thing? Should we even be talking about it? And it's like, well, it was kind of a record of observation for a number of years, so it had its usefulness, but there's definitely I don't know how to put it, just everyone always wants to be kind of critical of everything. So I think if we step back and kind of welcome everyone, it's going to be I think things could be better, and people would not quite kumbaya, but definitely come together in a more cordial and proactive way, for sure.
And I got another couple of questions, but Rick Smith, I know that you've got to run, so we will expect a full report when you get back, okay?
Absolutely. Kim and I may compare notes, but yeah, we'll do a report when we get back.
Awesome. So again, Rick, thanks for being on the show tonight. And Kim, I know you got to go early too, but I still got a few more questions here, Larry, before we move on. I just would love to know, in your opinion, of the people that are chasers, what's the main motivation for a majority of them? Is it monetization? Is it just the thrill of doing it? Is it helping the warning process, the National Weather Service? What's the main motivation for people that are out there? I'm just looking at these dots on a map, and I worry. I just wonder about the people. And I know some of them, but I don't know a lot of them. So what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, and I think it's a mixed review of that. And I'd say 90% of them out there are out there for real proactive reasons. So everything I'm talking about, all these negative, kind of points I'm putting out there are a very small portion of people, but I'm always saying we can make that percentage even smaller. In terms of monetization, yeah, there's your social media chasers, people who have big followings online. They kind of make it their full-time jobs in a way, so they need some way to make money. So they approach, roofing companies, storm shelter companies, like, hey, I'll be a sponsor. I want to get some money behind this. I'll do some sponsored content for you. And anytime there's a severe weather event, I'm going to go out there and chase it. I'm going to capture some footage for you. And visual stuff like that gets the views online. People want to see that. If I live in Northwest Arkansas, but a crazy tornado is happening in Eastern Colorado or the Chicago area, and I could be in one of those areas right now, it'll get views from not just my network, but an entire network of people. So as I said earlier, weather affects everybody. You see a smaller percentage, I think, of people out there with kind of that meteorology background out there doing any sort of data gathering, launching probes. I know Reed launches rockets into storms on occasion. And I think a majority of them, though, are out there confirming Doppler indicated rotation. They're saying, okay, we have rotation. We have a funnel coming down and it's touching the ground. Let's call it in. Let's get those sirens going. If they want to get a great picture behind it, I think that is a big indicator for them. That's a big source of revenue, a source of praise online. Especially with your old school chasers, I think that's less so a thing. They're not as social media driven. They're more out there just to gather data. They're out there to call the National Weather Service. They're ham radio operators who are just fanatics in the ham radio world who want to call it in and test out their gear. There's a lot of tech nuts out there. So you get a wide variety when you cast that net out there, but most people are good people. And it does feel very isolated though. There's this guy, he has a YouTube channel. I can't remember his name. It's something pi, like pi, like the equation. And he drives a little Prius and chases storms. And his Prius got struck by lightning a few weeks ago, and it was all over every chaser's social media. But this kid does not have a big following, but he's out there driving himself, recording, making YouTube videos. And you see a lot of people like that, just kind of one or two people in a car, and they kind of communicate to each other online, but everyone's pretty isolated in that way. But it's a community and you're aware of each other. But I'm not the biggest social media presence out there, but I'm definitely intrigued to talk to every chaser and their thought process. I mean, I've heard the drama story.
We'll get you some followers here on this show here. We'll hype you up here in a minute.
You're great.
But and again, I know we got to take a break in a second. Do most of the chasers sign a deal with these brokers that sell their video for them? Is that a thing, or is that a small percentage? Again, I'm just trying to figure out the business model.
Yeah, and I think that's a small percentage. Some people work with brokers. Some people, like for me, I was just wanting to talk about. I talked about weather to my friends, and they're like, okay, man, like that's enough. Like you talk about weather all the time, anytime, anything develops. So I was like, well, there's a community online, and there's a lot of groups, especially on Facebook. And I know, James, you take great advantage of social media. I mean, not even local stuff, but stuff around the world, and pointing that out. And I was very fascinated by that. And I was like, well, I would love to talk about my favorite things with weather. That's all I wanted to do. And got a little bit of a following. The biggest things with that, I mean, you see people who are like, crazy storms are happening, it's the end of the world. So you have end of the world Facebook groups promoting your stuff, or you have people who just like pretty clouds and they're promoting your stuff. Then you have aggressive chasers who are like, this guy doesn't know, or he does know what they're talking about. You get a mixed review. In terms of monetization, yeah, once you get a following, I think people just act like cold call, sort of things, and call every insurance company, anything that could be related to weather. So insurances, storm shelters, roofing companies, anything you see kind of aftermath wise, you'd be like, hey, if you give me some money, you throw something my way, I'll hype you up. We could do some tier options, a subscription model sort of thing, where like tier 1, I'll mention your name once and you give me X amount of dollars. Tier 2, I'll mention your name even more and you give me more money. Tier 3, I'll promote you on everything I got. I know like you hear flex tape on some people's social media where it's like, oh, I got hit by so much hail, but my flex tape has got me going. And once you get a big following, they kind of reach out to you at that point. For me, I'm not interested in that sort of hype. I mean, sure, it's great to make money doing what you love, but I think it becomes when anything you love becomes a business model, it doesn't become fun anymore. It becomes a business. So.
Yeah, and again, I'm all for making money. I mean, look, we've got to feed our families. I mean, I am. Some people are, they're just developing this new business model for weather people, and that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's just interesting to me to watch from a distance how that whole thing kind of unfolds in the field out there. But it seems like most of the chasers have a good heart and they get along. And like I say, I'm sure there's a few.
Absolutely.
There's a clown in every group. Every baseball team I've ever coached, every TV station I worked in, there's always some knucklehead. I mean, there's always going to be one in every group. But
and what I talk about is for the knuckleheads. Exactly. This is who this is for. yeah,
exactly. But real quick, and we're going to take after this question, I'm going to take a break. So let's say we've got a 16-year-old kid listening to the show, and they really want to do what you do. What's your advice to them? Because goodness, you look at just going down and filling up their car with gas. It's insane right now. If you're 16 years old, but they still want to. I mean, what's your advice to them right now?
Yeah, don't chase the social media hype. I mean, if you're doing something you love, like I used to be just like that. When I was younger, I'd be like, I need as many followers as I can get, and then when I go talk to my friends or strangers, I can be, look at this. This is pretty cool, huh? But in reality, after you get a little older, you're like, I'm not interested in that. I'm truly interested in weather. So if you're really interested in weather, go for it. If you're just interested in a following, I don't know that direction you should take. You should take a step back. I say take some Skywarn courses. I say build a community around you. Find some friends online or in person. I'm sure there's local organizations. Go to a convention. Ask around, say, hey, I'm new, I'm young, I'm really into weather. What should I do? I would say if you're really into it, get really into math, get into physics, learn about what's really happening out there. It's beautiful. Some people take a poetic sort of view of weather. Some people take a differential equations sort of view of weather. And I think there's a beautiful, Venn diagram kind of overlap right there. So, I would say go out there, and if you're really into it, get some background in it. Find a community in it, and don't rush. I mean, you have plenty of time. I mean, there's people in their 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. You can do this the rest of your life. So I know some chasers don't even start until their 40s, and I know Tim Marshall's even out there, still doing his thing. And I mean, he's away from home all the time. I can imagine that, but people are always going to be out there really, really pushing.
See, us old farts, we still get around. I mean, but
You're not that
people
old.
of our generation. So let's take a quick break. We're going to hear from Tony Rice and his astronomy report. We've got Jen, who is not on the show tonight because of severe weather, but she did send, hey, this week in tornado history. We'll come back and talk about the current weather situation. A lot of things are going on right now. We'll do again, we don't have Jen here. So, and by the way, I got a note that said Jen was on the Storm Front Freaks podcast that just was released. It's always interesting when one of our people join another weather podcast. So if you want to check it out, that is available now. But let's take a quick break, and we will come right back as WeatherBrains rolls along.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your astronomy outlook.
The moon reaches full phase just before 8 a.m. Eastern on Tuesday morning, just about 12 hours before it reaches perigee, the moon's closest point to Earth in its roughly month-long orbit. That's good enough for a supermoon label. Now, the exact definition is subject to some debate. Timeanddate.com and the Earth Sky blog, they picked a line in the proverbial space dust for how close the moon has to be, but their lines are interestingly about 3,000 kilometers apart. NASA astrophysicist Fred Espernek weighed in, as well as Richard Knoll, the astrologer who coined the term in the first place. They both picked a nice round 90% of that distance. But Fred bases his calculations on the current month, while Noel has picked the closest perigee in the calendar year for some reason. Take your pick because there's no official definition. It's all in good fun. So why is tonight just as good as tomorrow night? Remember those calendars we used to get from our insurance agents? Many of them had an open circle on the day of the full moon. So we tend to think of this as a day-long event. It isn't. The full moon occurs at an instant in time. Moments before the moon is nearly full, then it's full, then it's nearly full again, beginning that next lunation cycle. Because this month it reaches that full phase early on Tuesday morning, that makes Monday just as good. Elsewhere in the sky, while you're out looking at the moon, use it to find the heart of the Scorpion. The moon is passing through Scorpius this week. Right there in the middle of the constellation is the red giant star Antares, also known as the heart of the Scorpion. Last night, the nearly full moon was up and slightly to the right of Antares. Tonight, it's slightly below and to the left. And Tuesday night, the moon will be to the left of the Scorpion's tail. That's your astronomy outlook. Follow me at RTP Hokey for more spacey stuff like this.
It looked like we were driving into a dump site or a burned out slum, or what I would imagine a bombed out city would have looked like after World War II. These are the words of Steve Ullman. He was 22 and a senior member of the Mankato Civil Air Patrol Squadron when an F-5 hit Tracy, Minnesota on June 13, 1968. He was dispatched to Tracy on a search and rescue mission. 11 tornadoes were confirmed on this day. 5 were in the state of Minnesota. All of those rated F0, but this one. The devastating tornado struck just after 7 p.m. Central Time. It traveled close to 13 miles. Over 125 people were injured, and sadly, there were 9 fatalities. 110 or more homes had major damage. 13 farms and 10 businesses were destroyed. For the Minneapolis Star, the force of this tornado lifted a boxcar from the tracks and moved it 1.5 blocks into a residential section. Read about this event and hundreds more at tornadotalk.com.
When the weather ball is red, warmer weather is ahead. When the weather ball is white, colder weather is in sight. When the weather ball is green, no change in the weather is foreseen. When colors blink by night or day, precipitation's on the way.
So let's do a quick weather roundup here. This is for June the 13th, 2022. For a lot of the country, it's just hot, excessive heat. Where we are down here in the deep south, we had mostly mid 90s today. Neil, how you doing on heat over there in your neck of the woods?
Boy, it's pretty brutal. I went for a run about 3:00 this afternoon. I thought I was going to have another near-death experience. It was like almost 100. I think we will hit 100 tomorrow, but we've got some wild weather potentially on the short-range models. We got this MCS that's supposedly going to form coming out of Wisconsin and go straight southeast, go off the coast of the Carolinas and form into a low. So we'll see if that materializes.
We'll see. So Kim, how you doing on the heat in Norman?
Oh, it's been brutal too. I mean, while we've mostly stayed in the 90s in air temperature, the dew point temperatures across much of the state have been in the high 70s and lower 80s over the last couple of days. And that is just, the heat index values have been well over 100. It's been a very rude welcome into summer. We had such a nice little transition from May into June where we got to enjoy a lot of rain, and it's like it just in one day it was over. We woke up and it was summer, and I'm a little disappointed that going to Wisconsin isn't going to be cooler. We're really going to be enjoying this same air mass just a little bit further north, so we'll knock a couple of degrees off of the dew point temperature, but otherwise it's going to be in the 90s. It'll be very similar. I'm a little bit sad. I was looking forward to getting an escape north, but like you said, a lot of the country is gripped by this. There's just not a whole lot of escape.
No, and I guess Larry, you're under the middle of this thing too, huh? It's going to be hot where you are.
Yeah, I think the heat index was above 103 today, and between got up to 110, I believe, in certain areas by Joplin, Southwest Missouri area. So it's been hot. It's been very, very humid. I was in Colorado just before this. It was very nice and highs in the 70s, 80s, and at night got down in the 50s. So it was a rough wake up call coming back home on Sunday afternoon when I felt like I walked into an oven. But I'm used to it. It's great to be home, but we're back into the summer months.
Yep, I do weather on stations in Cape Girardeau and then across the river in Mount Vernon, Illinois, and it's been tough. So I guess to escape, you have to go far west. Bill Murray, it's down here. We did mid 90s today, and we're just going to stay in the mid 90s for a while. And the tropics looks like a little feature might form in the Western Caribbean. Looks like that thing might come across the Yucatan Bay of Campeche, probably going south of Brownsville if anything happens. I don't think we have any tropical trouble for the United States shoreline for the next 5 days or so. So that's the current weather roundup here. And again, Jen is off. I promise we're going to do a double email segment, and hopefully the next time. And again, let me just say this too, a logistical housekeeping note here. We are doing next week's show Thursday of this week. So again, the show that is scheduled for June 20th will be recorded on June the 16th at 7 Central, 8 Eastern, because I'm going to try and take a vacation week. And the last time I tried to do that, it didn't work. Sometimes in the weather business, you try and take a week and it just doesn't work. I mean, the week after Christmas, we had a tornado event and then a snow event, and it just didn't work. So I've not had a day off in like a year. And for mental health purposes, it's really a good thing to take a break. So I'm going to try and do that next week. So anyway, 2 shows coming up this week. And we'll see if, and I don't know if Jen can join us Thursday, but whenever the next time she's on, we'll do a lot of email here. But let's do picks of the week. I know everybody's busy. Everybody's got to go places. So let's go right to Kim, who is packing her bags, getting ready to go to Wisconsin. Kim, what's your pick of the week for us this week?
Yeah, I thought thematically appropriate as we were talking about tornadoes and also how hot it is. There was this great article in one of the most recent issues of BAMS called Fire Generated Tornadic Vortices. And it sort of overviews what's known about the tornadoes that are generated in and around wildfires. And I thought that it was just really interesting. Apparently, these things can have the intensity comparable to an EF2 plus tornado at their strongest. And so sometimes when you're looking at fire damage, you're also looking at this interesting phenomenon causing some additional problems. And it's obviously a big issue for firefighting, just not a lot known about it. So if you want to see what is known, I thought this was a really nice article characterizing some of what we have.
Outstanding. We'll have this up on weatherbrains.com. And we should congratulate Neil for calling the NWS Director News Conference at the exact moment last Monday night. He couldn't tell us who, but it happened right on time, according to his information he shared here. And we were delighted to see that Ken Graham is the new director of the National Weather Service. So, Neil, thanks for your tip on that.
You bet. He's going to be awesome. It's what a fantastic choice. And Jamie Rome and Mike Brennan are going to be holding the fort down at NHC.
Yeah, I think it's going to work out. Yeah, there you go. I think it's going to work out great. I mean, a lot of us have known Ken for a long time, and he's just the right guy for the job. He understands there's a lot of dynamics in play, and you know this better than anybody, Neil. And takes a unique type person to handle that position. But I think he's a great person for the job. He's qualified to do it, and expect some great things. So, Bill Murray, when are we going to get him on the show here? That's your next.
I'm still so traumatized by Dennis Feltgen being his handler that I'm afraid to reach out because I got my hand slapped so many times for Hurricane Center people. So I'm going to ask the numerical weather prediction czar to see if he can work his channels.
There you go. Well, Neil, what's your pick of the week? Go.
So my pick of the week is a House Science hearing scheduled for 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. It'll be live streamed on the internet. The title of the hearing is What's the Forecast? A Look at the Future of Weather Research. And the witnesses are Brad Coleman, who is the AMS president-elect from Bayer, Kevin Petty from Spire, Fred Carr from OU, and Scott Glenn from Rutgers. And I think it's going to be an awesome hearing. I'm really excited to hear what they have to say.
Be very interesting. And my pick, it's an AMS short course. These are really good. I don't know if everybody takes advantage of these things, but they got one coming up called Use of Environmental Satellite Data Products for Detecting Volcanic Eruptions, Forecasting Tropical Cyclones, and Nowcasting Severe Weather. And they're going to have multiple opportunities for this in June, but it looks great. And again, that's the kind of stuff that I love to be involved with. I know Bill Line is involved with that, Scott Lindstrom, and many others. So it's going to be great. So again, we'll put the link and the registration link up on weatherbrains.com. You don't have to be an AMS member. It's obviously cheaper if you are one. All right. So let's see here. I guess we're going to go. Larry, we've stalled long enough. So what you got for us? Give us a pick of the week. He probably has no idea that he has to have a pick of the week. But you in the next 15 seconds are going to come up with one that's something weather related that's really good. And it's going to be a website or a book or hardware or software, something.
Absolutely.
You could pick your TED. You could pick your TED talk. I mean,
absolutely
anything.
And I'll definitely go that route. I believe you should check out my TED talk. Go to TED.com, look up Larry Fleury. That's Fleury. And or you can just look up the ethics of storm chasing. It's also on YouTube on the TED channel. You can check that out, and where I talk about my TED talk, the ethics of weather, what to do. I talk about the case study of Tim and Paul Samaras in the Moore, Oklahoma tornado in great detail, and how everyone should be a spotter but not a chaser. And I'd also like to point out Weather 2020, some of my good friends in the Midwest here, and what they're doing with statistical data, not just physics, but pointing out kind of different things happening with patterns and what's going on in the weather world. So check it out.
Awesome. And Snow truly is your middle name.
Yeah. So my name is Larry Snow Fleury. My parents thought it was funny. My brother's actually Thomas Rain Fleury. So I think I got the better deal. But
that's awesome. When I was a kid, I would listen to this disc jockey on WLS in Chicago at night, big 50,000 watt blowtorch, a guy named John Records Landecker, and that was his signature line. Records truly is my middle name, and so Snow truly is your middle name.
It is, and I was born on Groundhog Day as well.
Oh wow, this gets even better. So while we get plug your social media accounts here, let's get you some Twitter people here, or Gram or Talk or whatever you're on, YouTube. Plug away, go.
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at Larry Fleury, Larry Fleury. On Twitter, Larry Snow Fleury, and on Facebook, I'm Larry Snow Fleury as well. So check that out.
All right. So when the show's over, I'll be one of your first new followers here. That'll be awesome. All right. Bill Murray, go. What you got?
Yeah, James, I'm going to pick Tim Vasquez's Forecast Lab tonight. Last Wednesday on the 8th, he did a really nice addendum at the end of his outstanding forecast discussion that I know a lot of people enjoy, but he explained 24 SPC forecast charts in detail. And I think it's a great thing to go if you are a fan of the SPC Meso analysis page, which we all are. I think it's a great primer if you're new to it, or if you just need some more, need some more education on that. Check out Tim Vasquez's Forecast Lab, and that show especially. All of them are there, and you can go back and enjoy them. But that one's really pretty spectacular. James, I need a guest for Thursday night. I still do not have one. So our wonderful army of crowdsourcing guest folks out there, I'll look back through the list, send me any new ones you got, any late ones, and we'll see what we can't scare up for Thursday night as we have a special vacation show in honor of James's week off.
Yep. And let me just say too, one other logistical note. I do have a live shot Thursday, and I'm trying to see where it is because I might be a smidgen late getting the invites out.
I'll be in East Aboga.
It is in it's Lakeshore, so that's not too far from the TV, so I think we're okay. But anyway, if it's like 6:55 Central and you don't see an invite, just don't panic. It'll be coming up there shortly. But again, we quit
panicking a long time ago, James.
Yeah. There's you never know with me. But again, the audio version, the produced version, is going to be released to the world on Monday, the one we do Thursday. So, and again, we got to go early because everybody's got trips and things to do. But Larry, thanks. You were a great guest. Appreciate you taking the time to come on the show this week.
Thank you guys very much. Appreciate it.
And if you're new to this, we are typically on the air Monday nights at 8 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Central. And a lot of folks watch on the YouTube or live.bigbrainsmedia.com, but we know that most of you listen, and we are thankful for that. If you would like to get in touch with us, the email address, it is email@weatherbrains.com, and I promise we'll do a triple email segment next time Jen is on the show. We'd love to hear from you. We love the iTunes comments and comments in general. Like us, hate us, whatever. That's always interesting. So on behalf of the entire WeatherBrains crew, I'm James Spann. Thanks for listening. Have a great week, and God bless. All right, guys. Thank you all. Great
Thanks,
show.
everybody.
Larry, thank you.
Yeah,
that was
thank
fun.
You, Larry.
You're a great guest.
Again sometime soon.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Y'all have a great week, and we'll see you.